The silence in Thomas Mitchell's mansion had become as familiar as breathing. At 52, he'd grown accustomed to the quiet that filled the grand rooms, the soft tick of antique clocks, the whisper of expensive curtains in the breeze, the careful footsteps of household staff moving through their duties. What he wasn't accustomed to was laughter, real, joyful, uninhibited laughter floating down from the second floor on this quiet Tuesday afternoon. Thomas paused at the bottom of the mahogany staircase, his briefcase still in hand from another long day managing his investment firm. The sound was so unexpected, so wonderfully out of place, that for a moment he simply stood and listened. It had been 3 years since the accident. 3 years since 8-year-old Lily's world had changed forever, confining her to a wheelchair and stealing the carefree spirit that had once filled these halls with music and movement. The specialists had been clinical in their explanations. Spinal cord injury, limited mobility, extensive therapy needed. What they hadn't prepared him for was watching his bright dancing daughter retreat into herself, becoming as quiet as the house that surrounded them. Thomas climbed the stairs slowly, following the sound of Lily's laughter mixed with something else. Music. Not from the expensive sound system he'd had installed, but someone singing, a warm, melodic voice he didn't immediately recognize. As he reached the landing, he could see into Lily's room through the partially open door. What he saw there stopped him in his tracks, his heart catching in his chest. Maria Gonzalez, their housekeeper of 6 months, was kneeling beside Lily's wheelchair, her hands gently holding his daughter's. But they weren't just sitting together. They were moving, swaying, dancing. Maria had positioned herself so that Lily could feel the rhythm, could be part of the movement even from her chair. She sang softly in both Spanish and English, an old folk song her grandmother had taught her and Lily, beautiful, precious. Lily was glowing with happiness, her face radiant with pure joy as she moved her arms and upper body in time with Maria's gentle guidance. "Like this, Mia," Maria said softly, showing Lily how to move her hands in graceful arcs. "Feel the music in your heart. Dancing isn't just about feet. It's about expressing the joy inside you." Lily giggled, a sound Thomas hadn't heard in months. "I can feel it, Maria. I can feel the music." Thomas pressed himself against the wall, not wanting to interrupt this magical moment, but unable to look away. Tears he hadn't expected began to blur his vision. Since the accident, he'd thrown himself into work, hiring the best therapists, the most qualified caregivers, sparing no expense for Lily's care. But somehow, in all his efforts to give her the best of everything, he'd forgotten to simply be present, to find joy with her in the midst of the challenges. Maria had been with them only 6 months, but Thomas could see now what he'd missed. While he'd been focused on treatments and progress reports, this quiet, gentle woman had been teaching his daughter something far more precious, that life could still hold wonder, even when it looked different than expected. "Papa always says, I used to dance all the time," Lily was saying, her voice wistful but not sad, "before my legs stopped working." "And you still can, Carita," Maria replied, spinning slowly so Lily could watch the movement. "Dancing comes from in here." She placed her hand over Lily's heart. "Not from your legs. Look, your spirit is dancing right now. I can see it in your beautiful smile." Thomas watched as Maria guided Lily through different arm movements, teaching her how each gesture could tell a story, express an emotion, create beauty. His daughter's face was more alive than he'd seen it since before the accident. "Can we dance to Papa's favorite song?" Lily asked suddenly. "The one Mama used to play?" Thomas's breath caught. Clara's favorite song. The one she'd danced to in this very room when Lily was a baby, spinning around with their daughter in her arms. He hadn't heard it played since Clara's passing 2 years ago. "Of course, sweetheart," Maria said gently. But first, why don't you ask your papa to join us? I think he's been listening for a while now. Thomas froze. Had she known he was there? Papa, Lily called out, turning her chair toward the door. Will you come dance with us? There was no hiding now. Thomas stepped into the room, still overwhelmed by what he'd witnessed. I heard the music, he said softly. Lily beamed at him, more radiant than he'd seen her in years. Maria's teaching me that I can still dance, Papa? Even in my chair. Want to see? Thomas nodded, not trusting his voice. Maria stood gracefully and moved to the small speaker in the corner, cueing up the song, Clara's song. As the familiar melody filled the room, she returned to Lily's side. Show him, Mija, Maria encouraged. What followed was the most beautiful dance Thomas had ever seen. Lily moved her arms like wings, her face glowing with concentration and joy. Maria mirrored her movements, sometimes kneeling, sometimes standing, always connected to Lily's rhythm. And slowly, tentatively, Thomas found himself moving too, just swaying at first, then stepping closer, until he was part of their circle. For the first time since the accident, father and daughter were truly together in a moment of pure happiness. Later that evening, after Lily had been tucked into bed, with promises of more dancing lessons, Thomas found Maria in the kitchen, quietly finishing her duties. Maria, he began, then stopped, struggling for words. She looked up from wiping down the counters, her kind eyes patient. I've been so focused on what Lily couldn't do anymore, he said finally, that I forgot to see what she still could do. You gave her back her joy. How can I ever thank you? Maria smiled, the same gentle smile that had lit up his daughter's world. Mr. Mitchell, Lily never lost her joy. It was always there, waiting. Sometimes we just need someone to help us remember how to find it again. That night, Thomas lay awake thinking about the gift he'd witnessed. Not just Maria's kindness to Lily, but the reminder that healing comes in many forms. Sometimes it's medical treatments and therapy, and sometimes it's a caring soul who sees past limitations to the beautiful spirit within. From that day forward, the Mitchell house was no longer silent. It was filled with music, with laughter, and with the sound of dancing, proving that the most profound movements of the heart require no steps at all,